new empires and kingdoms. Prashastis and what they tell us. Have you ever seen some inscriptions on stones of the wall of a temple showing name and address of the donator? Similarly, inscriptions were made on stones and pillars in the praise of different kings, which are called prashastis. Prashasti is a Sanskrit word meaning in praise of. Prashasti is a special kind of inscription and gives information about the king and his reign. Many prashastis have been found in India. In this chapter, you will study about the different prashastis and the information revealed by these. Samudragupta's Prashasti. Samudragupta, the ruler of the Gupta Empire, CAD 335, 380, and successor to Chandragupta I, is considered to be one of the greatest military geniuses in Indian history, and sometimes also called the Napoleon of India. The main source of Samudragupta's history is an inscription engraved on one of the stone pillars set up by him in Allahabad. In this inscription, Samudragupta details his conquests. This inscription is also important because it indicates by naming the different kings and people who populated India in the first half of the 4th century AD. The inscription was composed by Harisena, who was an important poet of Samudragupta's court. Line 1920 describes Samudragupta's Deccan campaign or Dakshinapath. There were 12 Deccan kings which are mentioned in the Allahabad Prashasti. Line 21 to 23 mention the names of the 9 kings of Aryavarta defeated by Samudragupta. Line 22 specially describes about the 5 neighboring states, including Assam, coastal Bengal, Nepal, and number of Gana Sangha in the northwest, which were occupied by the Gupta king Samudragupta. These frontier kingdoms were bound to pay homage or tribute to Samudragupta. Line 24 mentions the names of the foreign kings who paid homage and offered allegiance to Samudragupta. Not only that, they also had offered the hands of their daughters in order to show him respect. These include the descendants of Kushanas and Shakas and the ruler of Sri Lanka. Genealogies. Most Prashastis also mention the ancestors of the ruler like the Harisenas. The Prashasti also mentions Samudragupta's great-grandfather, grandfather, father and mother. His mother Kumara Devi belonged to Lichavi Gana, while his father Chandragupta was the first ruler of the Gupta dynasty to adopt the grand title of Maharaja Adhiraja, a title that Samudragupta also used. His great-grandfather and grandfather are mentioned simply as Maharajas. It seems as if the family gradually rose to importance. Samudragupta in turn figures the genealogies, lists of ancestors of later rulers of the dynasty, such as his son Chandragupta II. We know about him from inscriptions and coins. He led an expedition to western India where he overcame the last of the Shakas. According to later belief, his court was full of many scholars and poets, including Kalidasa and Aryabhat the astronomer, etc. They were known as Navratnas, or the 9 jewels. Harshavardhana and Harshacharitra. Besides inscriptions, some rulers can be known by their biographies. Harshavardhana, who ruled nearly 1400 years ago, was one such ruler. His court poet Banabhat wrote his biography Harshacharitra, which reveals information about the life of the king, his character, his reign, the pilgrims who visited his court, etc. Harsha was not the eldest son of his father, but became king of Thanesar after the death of both his father and elder brother. His empire extended over eastern Punjab, whole of Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Bengal, Orissa, Rajasthan, and parts of Sindh and the Himalayas. Harsha was a great patron of literature and learning. He used to give liberal grants to scholars. For this purpose, he had reserved 1/4 of the state income. Liberal grants were given to educational institutions like Nalanda, Kashi, Vallabhi, and Vikramashila universities. Thus, Sanskrit language and literature continued to flourish during the reign of Harsha, along with other branches of knowledge such as philosophy, medicine, astronomy, metaphysics, grammar, logic, etc. He used to give liberal grants to scholars. His brother-in-law was the ruler of Kannauj, and he was killed by the ruler of Bengal. Harsha took over the kingdom of Kannauj and then led an army against the ruler of Bengal. Although he was successful in the east and conquered both Magad and Bengal, he was not as successful elsewhere. He tried to cross the Narmada to march into the Deccan, but was stopped by a ruler belonging to the Chalukya dynasty, Pulakeshin II. The Pallavas, the Chalukyas, and Pulakeshin's Prashasti. The Chalukyas and the Pallavas, the two South Indian states, became prominent and powerful during the 6th and the 8th century AD. The kingdom of the Pallavas spread from the region around their capital Kanchipuram to the Kaveri Delta, while that of the Chalukyas was centered around the Raichur Doab between the rivers Krishna and Tungabhadra. Aihole, the capital of the Chalukyas, was an important trading center. It developed as a religious center with a number of temples. The Pallavas and the Chalukyas frequently raided one another's lands, especially attacked capital cities which were prosperous towns. Pulakeshin II, 608 to 642 CE, is considered the greatest ruler of the Chalukya dynasty as he transformed the small Chalukyan kingdom into an extensive empire. The Aihole Prashasti 634 CE, written by Ravikrit, a Jain court poet, gives a detailed account of Pulakeshin's many military accomplishments. The famous Badami Chalukya's King Pulakeshi II during 610 to 642 AD was a follower of Jainism. The Shila Lake of Ravikriti in praise of Pulakeshi is still available in Meguti temple. Pulakeshin II was also a notable statesman. He established diplomatic relations with the king of Persia, Iran, Tripathi 399. Furthermore, he was considered a great administrator as he had succeeded in unifying large parts of South India under his rule. It also informs us about his ancestors, who are traced back through 4 generations from father to son. Pulakeshin evidently got the kingdom from his uncle. Aihole inscription mentioned achievements of Pulakeshi II. He defeated King Harshavardhana. According to Ravikriti, he led expeditions along both the west and the east coasts. Besides, he checked the advance of Harsha. There is an interesting play of words in the poem. Harsha means happiness. The poet says that after this defeat, Harsha was no longer Harsha. Aihole inscription of Pulakeshin II mentioned that Pulakeshin attacked the Pallava king, who took shelter behind the walls of Kanchipuram. But the Chalukya victory was short-lived. Ultimately, both the Pallavas and the Chalukyas gave way to new rulers belonging to Rashtrakuta and Chola dynasties. How were these kingdoms administered? As in the case of earlier kings, the king was assisted by the council of ministers and high officials. Sometimes one person held many offices. For example, besides being a Mahadandanayaka, Harisena was a Kumar Amatya, meaning an important minister, and a Sandhi Vigrahika, meaning a minister of war and peace. Generally, important administrative posts were hereditary. This means that sons succeeded fathers to these posts. For example, the poet Harisena was a Mahadandanayaka, or chief judicial officer, like his father. There were provincial and local governments also which worked at provinces and village levels. Besides, important men probably had a say in the local administration. These included the Nagara Shreshthi, or chief banker or merchant of the city, the Sarthavaha, or leader of the merchant caravans, the Prathama Kulika, or the chief craftsman, and the head of the Kayasthas, or scribes. Land revenues remained important for these rulers, and the village remained the basic unit of administration. Kings adopted a number of steps to win the support of men who were powerful, either economically or socially, or because of their political and military strength. A new kind of army. Kings of this period maintained a well-organized army of foot soldiers, archers, horsemen, elephants, and chariots, etc. Besides, the kings were also supported by some military leaders who provided troops whenever the king needed. These leaders were called samantas. They were not paid regular salaries, instead some of them received grant of land. They collected revenue from the land and used this to maintain the soldiers and provide war equipments. In some kingdoms where the ruler was weak, these samantas tried to become independent. Assemblies in the southern kingdoms. Besides the king and the council of ministers, there were other assemblies which worked at the village level. There was an assembly of chiefs called the Sabha. This included Brahmin landowners. These Sabhas functioned through sub-committees which looked after the welfare and the maintenance of the village, like irrigation, agricultural operations, making roads, local temples, etc. The Ur was another village assembly where the landowners were not Brahmins. They enjoyed many powers in the field of justice. The village assembly was responsible for collecting taxes, hearing disputes, and looking after local problems. In some kingdoms there were assemblies of merchants which were called Nagaram. It is likely that all these assemblies were dominated by rich and powerful landowners and merchants. Ordinary people in the kingdom. We can catch a glimpse of the lives of common people of ancient age from different plays, poems, stories, and other accounts. Kalidasa is known for his play depicting the life in the king's court. An interesting feature about these plays is that the king and most Brahmins are shown as speaking Sanskrit, while women and men other than the king and Brahmins use Prakrit. His play Abhijanana Shakuntalam is regarded to be the finest work. This play depicts the love story of King Dushayanta and a young woman named Shakuntala. Another novel, Kadambiri, also throws light on the life and beliefs of the ordinary people. Fa Hien, pilgrim from China, also mentioned the life and houses of common people. He writes, "The houses of the people stand apart like separate stars, and each family has a small tope, that is, pagoda, reared in front of its door. The smallest of these may be 20 cubits high, or rather more. They make, in monasteries, rooms for monks from all quarters, the use of which is given to travelling monks who may arrive and are provided with whatever else they require." He further mentions the plight of those who were treated as untouchables by the high and mighty. They were expected to live on the outskirts of the city. He writes, "If such a man enters a town or a marketplace, he strikes a piece of wood in order to keep himself separate." People hearing this sound know what it means and avoid touching him or brushing against him. Banabhat in his books also provides a vivid picture of the society. He writes that the king traveled with an enormous amount of equipment. Apart from weapons, there were things of daily use such as pots, pans, furniture, golden footstools, food, including animals such as goat, deers, rabbits, vegetables, spices, carried on carts or loaded onto back of animals such as camels and elephants. This huge army was accompanied by musicians beating drums and others playing horns and trumpets. Villagers had to provide hospitality along the way. They came with gifts of curds, gourd, and flowers, and provided fodder for the animals. They also tried to meet the king and place their complaints and petitions before him. The army left a trail of destruction behind. Elephants often trampled down the huts of the villagers, and the oxen, yoked to the caravans of merchants, ran away scared by the tumult. As Banabhatta says, the whole world was swallowed up in dust.